talk for 8 hours, Lisa. Don't worry.
We're live.
We're live. Hello. Is it 7:30? It's 7:30, and we are live on Google Hangouts. All right, so I think we're doing this right. We're live and we are on the air. Hello, everybody. It's the 14th of May. It's the 14th of May. God, best host in the world. The 14th of May, 2014, and this is the very first after dinner with the Critical Classroom Google Hangout, Google Hangout on air that we've ever done. I've been planning this for about a couple of years, ever since Hangouts on Air came out, and here we are, years later. So this broadcast is recording. So as the Hangout is being broadcast or streamed, it's being streamed onto YouTube. So you can either watch it here on Hangouts, or you can watch it via YouTube. You may already be on YouTube. I think there's about a minute or so delay in the broadcast. So before we start, I'll just do some housekeeping. At the end of the broadcast, I'll update the show notes. So if you click onto YouTube, and you'll see the video, and then there's the text underneath. So they are the show notes. I'll update those with any links that we might refer to. I'll get my pen and paper out first. Any links that we might, or resources that we might talk about as we're yarning, and then I'll put them in there so that you can find out more information. The second thing is that you might be watching this broadcast live, and there are 0 viewers, so right now there is nobody watching live, but hello anyway. Or you might be watching this in 6 months or 6 years. So either way, hello from the past. The third thing in terms of housekeeping that I wanted to say is that we will probably mention people who, there's a good chance, we haven't planned to, but there is a good chance that we may mention people who have passed away, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have passed away. So I'm just putting that out there right at the start. And the final housekeeping thing to get out of the way is that, one, this is our first Hangout, so we haven't done this before. We've done Hangouts before, but not live on air. And it's also not our technology. We don't have backup generators. So we apologise in advance for any technical issues that we may experience if we go off, because suddenly there's a blackout. We will no longer be here, and you'll have to go and do something else for the evening. So if something like that happens, we apologise in advance. We can't control it. We don't control Google. We're not Channel 9 or Channel 7. We don't have backup generators and all that kind of stuff. So if anything does happen and we suddenly go off the air, what we'll do is we'll just write a post about it on the blog, so you can just find out what happened, and we'll just write up what we were planning on talking about. So I think that's all of the housekeeping out of the way. Okay, so my name is Lisa Watego, and I'm the writer at the Critical Classroom. And I'm joined by Lisa Buxton, who is an Aboriginal Education Officer with the Catholic Education Office in Sydney. Hi, Lise.
Hi.
Hi. We're both here. And I think if these are successful, I'll probably ask other people to join us over time, so to talk about a range of topics. But okay, so the first thing we have to do is we have to do something that is now customary in Australia, and I'd like to acknowledge country, but I'm going to do that firstly by screen sharing. I'm going to share my screen with you. Share screen. This one. Start screen share. So this is my screen. If you can read this, you are on Aboriginal land. So this is this slide was used in an education context. Firstly, I'm pretty sure by Dr. Jean Phillips, probably in the early 2000s, who at the time was teaching at the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, and she was teaching within the Faculty of Education. And this was the very first slide that Dr. Phillips would show for her pre-service teachers in the EDB 007 course. Later on, I can't remember exactly when I started teaching, but QCA, but I used it at Queensland College of Art when I was teaching Indigenous art protocols and practices. I started using the same slide with the attribution, of course. But what I think is, I really wanted to show this one first, and I'll probably show it every time, because I think that it's a really powerful statement. When you see something like this, you know that you're on sovereign land, and you're reminded that Aboriginal people have not ceded sovereignty. They have not ceded sovereignty of the continent, so I think that's really important. And I know that some of you might be watching from outside of the Australian continent, but given that there are Indigenous peoples all over the world, there is a good chance that this statement is actually relevant to you. So to begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting from Turrbal and Yagara country, also known as Brisbane. And Lisa, you're broadcasting from?
I'm broadcasting from Gadigal Wongal land of the Eora Nation here in Sydney.
Excellent. All right, I'm just going to stop this screen share. Oh, there I am again. Right. Gives you a bit of a surprise when you suddenly see yourself on the telly. Okay. All right, so this week, Lisa and I are going to talk about the WIPC conference, which is the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. I've only been to the Melbourne conference, which was in 2009 or 2008, late 2008, 2009. But Lisa, you've been to quite a few WIPC conferences. What kinds of things? So we're heading to Hawaii on Saturday. We're both flying out on Saturday. What kinds of things can we expect from the WIPC conference next week in Hawaii?
Well, I think WIPC is unique in that, as far as I know, it's the only professional development opportunity for Indigenous people run by Indigenous people. Looking at the website, there's over 500 different workshops from people in education, from little ones in early childhood right through to higher education. And there are presenters from, North America, from Alaska, from Aotearoa, from our hosts in Native Hawaiians. The Sami people from Norway have been attending for, the last 12 years or so, I think, and then a large delegation from Australia, of course.
Yeah, I think I'm going to, I'm hoping a lot of people in my social networks are actually going, so I'm going to be meeting a lot of people for the first time, which I'm excited about. So, yeah, a lot of people have been talking about it, so it sounds good. How long have you been going to WIPC?
The first WIPC I went to, I think I just finished being a student. It was in 1993, the year of Indigenous peoples, and it was here in Australia, in Woollongong.
What was that like?
It was great. I mean, it was a bit scary. I was a lot younger then.
We were very young in 1993.
Yeah, and but there was some great aunties there that kind of, showed us around and what to do, and I think it was one of the best conference T-shirts that ever been produced. But
oh, really? You don't have it, do you?
No, I don't think I still have it. It's probably degraded to nothing by now. But I remember it was grey. It had like white handprints, and like circles and stuff. But yeah, and it was massive. Like for someone who's just come out of uni, and the fact that you're attending a conference and there was like 3,000 people from Indigenous nations across the globe was just phenomenal. So I've tried to make it, a regular event, and it happens once every 3 years, as you said. So, and I've been lucky to be working in the field of education since then. And so, I make it a priority as professional development to try and get there.
So, what have been some of the highlights over the years that you've been going to WIPC conferences?
Well, it's been a few years now, so too many to mention, I suppose. But I suppose one of the significant things I've found is the opening ceremonies where all the nations come together, and everyone's like wearing traditional dress or wearing colours that are like with that are associated with different nations and stuff. So I remember in '99 in Hilo, on the other side of the big island in Hawaii, it was one of the most culturally, visually spectacular things I'd ever seen. All the hotels were kind of like in a strip on the bay, and we went down to the bay, so we're all standing there on the sand, so to speak. Not quite as much sand as the Gold Coast, but anyway. And there was women from different communities, I assume, dressed up in their dress, and they were like dancing and singing. And then on the horizon you could see these dots, and as they come closer you realise that they were men coming in on canoes. Some people were lucky enough to get like the landscape shot of it.
Lovely. I don't think I'm going to get such a good photo.
Well, I remember too though it was just walking around the town of Hilo, and there were signs in every shop window, welcome Whoopsie delegates, which kind of made you feel a bit special. And there was
that's lovely though, when a town or a community welcomes a conference. Doesn't happen very often.
And it did, and like the little signs, and they had, if you showed your name tag, there was, you know, specials for meals and all this sort of thing. Yeah. And there was I remember a photographer who'd come down to different parts of the conference and take photos, and this was when it was film in those days. And then his whole shop front was just photos from the conference and different cultural events, and you could buy them for like 30 cents and stuff. So and I think that's
before digital. The days before digital. Now you just buy a USB stick.
Well, yeah, that's it. And then I suppose another highlight would have been when we were in Calgary, and we were hosted by, I think, the Nakota reservation. It was at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. You know, I remember we were all excited, checking the weather before we got there, and but then when we got there, it was a freaky kind of bit of a cold snap. Even though outside our hotel it had a sign, "Have a lovely summer," because it was their summer holidays. I think the Australians, or especially the mob we were with, had nearly every bit of clothing that they'd packed with them on, and still trying to move around to get warm. In that we found out later on that there was a lake about 1 kilometre away that never unfreezes, so there was a breeze coming through you know, and it was outdoors, but just spectacular seeing Native Americans coming down in their full gear on horseback and leading the parades of nations. And I'll never forget that they come out with gifts for people that were delegates from all over the world. And I opened a little bag, and it had handmade dream catcher made by a 7-year-old out of like a twig and wool, and had a little tag in it, you know, my name is such and such, I'm 7, I go to this school. You know, I actually still have that. So it was just that whole traditional thing of gift taking, gift giving and receiving, I suppose. And the workshops were in teepees on the reservation, you know, which was difficult for some, in that, you know, how we're all used to PowerPoints and stuff now, and there was, you know, leads running everywhere and stuff. But it also took us back to, I suppose, the, you know, the oral tradition and yarning and sharing stories, and I thought it was fabulous to experience that. A friend of mine actually went up on the hill and took a shot of of all the teepees, and then the Rocky Mountains in the background. It was a spectacular view and a great time.
Well, it sounds like it's great for the cultural stuff, as an educator though, do you get, is it good value as an educator in terms of you know, learning about what other programs are doing, learning about what other programs are available and what schools and different systems are doing?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you get the personal experience of what individuals are doing, what individual schools are doing and their programs that are successful, looking at the process that they have to establish that, but also you get to see what systems are doing as well across the country. I remember quite a few years ago when the Native Alaskan Network first launched their cultural standards, and that was huge at the time. No one else was doing that, and now, you know, across countries we're all looking at cultural standards. But it also wasn't just for the teachers. They had cultural standards for school administration, or I suppose what we call our systems of schools, and for, you know, communities and elders, and for young people, and you know, that their cultural knowledge being the foundation of their identity, and how Indigenous people have the right to that within their education systems. You know, and that's just schools of systems, but they also have, you know, Indigenous people within their ministers of Indigenous education and things like that, that we don't quite have access to here as yet.
Yeah. Now you're presenting. What's your paper on?
Oh, the paper that we're presenting is a group presentation. We're doing it from the Catholic Education Commission across New South Wales, and what we're going to do is showcase 4 dioceses and our approaches to personalised learning plans for Koori kids. In Sydney, we're going to focus on our team approach, in that we have the Archdiocese of Sydney is broken into 3 regions, so we have 3 Aboriginal education advisors in Sydney, and we also have regional Aboriginal community liaison officers. Now, that's not new to departments of education, but it's new to our Catholic system, I think. Yep. So it's a joint project of working together with families and communities, and looking at our students' learning journeys, if you will, from kindergarten right through to vocational education pathways or higher education. And we're hoping to also put a bit of a spotlight on our performing arts program. CASPA is a Sydney Performing Arts program, and we're fortunate enough to have a Indigenous ensemble of that. And so we're hoping to showcase the students' video and them performing and being proud in both their culture, identity, and faith.
Sounds great. So we've written up, I wrote up the WIPC conference as a something that teachers might want to go to. It's okay for white fellas to go, eh? Yeah.
There's, I mean, it will be largely Indigenous people, but there are non-Indigenous people that attend as a professional development opportunity for themselves, and they get to see firsthand, you know, expression of spirit in culturally appropriate ways. You're virtually living and breathing it there for your 5 days. But aren't you presenting a paper as well?
Yes, I'm doing two papers. Oh, so the first one's on two. So the first one's on Australian Black History Month. I'm doing that one with Sam Cook and Juliet Hubbard. Though they're not presenting, so I'm presenting on their behalf. And the other presentation is on Deadly Bloggers, which is the Directory of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander bloggers. I'm going to talk about how it got started, and then kind of go into a bit of a workshop about how to start blogging if you're interested in blogging, and why you should be interested in blogging, and why you should blog more, Lisa.
Yes, Lisa. I should.
Why you should blog more. Okay, so yeah, no, it sounds fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to it.
The unique thing though with Whoopsie too is that yes, there's going to be over 500 different workshops. But WIPC always has the cultural excursion element,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that gives an opportunity to go into communities or into schools. I'm hoping to go into a school where culture and identity is the foundation of the young people's schooling experience,
Yep.
while still incorporating and concentrating on, your Western education system. So, I think it'd be really interesting to see how that's done.
Yeah.
And and because I know Native Hawaiians are very strong on language and stuff as well. So, and that's in Australia here with our new national professional standards for teachers, recognising students' linguistic background, and Aboriginal English is part of that standard. So, how to looking into that and how language is incorporated into the day-to-day running of the school.
So I've written up Whoopsie on our blog. So if you're interested in attending, because it's every 3 years, at the end of the conference next week, they'll announce where the next one is. So we actually don't know where 2017 will be yet. So once we find out, we'll let you know, and then you can start saving up for it. Might actually be here in Australia, who knows. So if you've just joined us, this is the after dinner sessions with the Critical Classroom. This is our very first hangout on air. We're talking about, we've just had a yarn about the World Indigenous Peoples Conference in Hawaii, World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education, which is in Hawaii next week. And the other segment that I hope we can do regularly is talking about resources. So Lisa and I have both found a resource that we would like to share. So Lisa, you can go first.
Oh, thanks for that. No worries. Okay, this is not a new resource, but I think the second series is quite recent. I think it was 2011. And it's called Sharing Our Stories. And what it is 14 big books, but they're for middle and upper primary students, which I find interesting.
That's unusual. Normally big books are for little people.
Yes, but these have quite a bit of text on the pages. So, and what I really like about it is that it really places the stories within country. And it starts with the section about our community, with information that places children in country, and a bit about the community of whose cultural knowledge is contained within the story. And it's the community that's identified the stories that are being shared. For example, the moon and the gecko is one of the stories from the Barkindji people of Darling River, the Wilcannia mob.
Victoria.
I have it here, but it's a big book, so it's going to be a bit difficult to...
Oh, diddly. I say it uses photographs as well.
Yeah, on the cover and stuff, it uses photographs, and it uses photographs within the actual text itself, so that kids get to see, like, there's kids playing on the riverbank sort of thing. There's a young child in front of the school, then an elder holding up an emu egg. So even though the big book's largely text, there's photos all the way through. It also has a double page about the storyteller and why storytelling is important, which is good because it acknowledges whose cultural knowledge is contained within the story. But when it actually gets to the story, it's illustrated by young people from that community by their artwork. And then there's a section called Children's Voices where these young people talk about the learnings from the story and talk about how they're proud of their culture and proud of their artwork, how doing this project, how that made them feel. So, and in a way, with the children's voices, it's the kids almost talking directly to other kids. So it's children teaching children, which I think makes it adds a real element to the story, makes it
Yeah.
authentic learning, if you will. It makes it relevant to the kids. And then after the story, it has elders' voices, and their respected community members yarning about their life experience and the importance of teaching the younger generations as they come through in Aboriginal ways of doing and knowing, and incorporating that into the school curriculum. And then finally, it has over like the 2 pages, it has the story in the original language. So it's great to see our language or Indigenous languages in print included in the book as well. So,
fantastic. And who made that one? Pearson, eh?
Pearson, yeah. Pearson released it, and it has a teacher's resource with it. So it has a disc that has the stories on audio, and then it divides. It's linked to our new Australian curriculum, but it's almost like a guided reading. The teaching strategies are linked page by page to the text.
Yeah.
And some teaching ideas and things like that.
Fantastic.
So,
I'll put the links.
I think on the website as well, there's some like short films. So
okay.
you can then go and see kids in country, or a storyteller talking a bit in more detail about the art of storytelling, or one of the community members. I haven't had a chance to see them all, but I thought that was also an interesting way to incorporate technology and really place kids in country.
Sounds good. I'll put the links up in the show notes on that one.
Okay.
Okay, so my turn. My show and tell time. There we go. Can you see that? Is it?
Yeah, okay.
Sacred Cows. This is an old one. It's an old one, as in it's 1996, and it's by Anita Heiss, and it was published by Magabala Books. I have to admit, I just read it last weekend, and I really enjoyed it. It's a little bit dated because it's 96, and, you know, we have the internet and social networking and all that stuff now, and, you know, the country kind of changes, but this is a good book, and it's definitely an essential book to buy. What I like... you know, Anita, and we know this from her other work and in speaking with her, that she's very sharp, she's funny, she's clever. And when I read it, I just think, I realise how observant she is. And I know that artists are like that, because it's like they're photographers of the world, except they take the photograph, use text instead of an actual image. And Anita is fantastic at capturing aspects of Australian life that just really aren't that pretty, but she does it in a way that just makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. In the book, she kind of unpacks a whole bunch of stuff about Australia: gambling, footy, the Melbourne Cup, royal shows, public holidays, movies, drinking, Vegemite, all that sort of stuff. I originally thought, as I started reading it, I thought it would be a good book for people who want to learn about Australia, but then I kind of realised that there are some parts of the book, there are parts in the book where I thought, you actually have to be Australian and grow up here to understand what she's talking about. The language is really familiar, and the concepts are really familiar. I don't know if you would get the context of it if you were from somewhere else, but I just kind of want to read. And she's biting, and she's clever, and she depicts an Australia that is not very pretty at all. And I wanted to I think the first paragraph of her introduction kind of explains the approach or the reasoning or where she's coming from. She says, "I remember how at uni I'd studied Australian history and Aboriginal history, or prehistory as we were often told. My many days, nights and weekends were spent scanning library shelves looking for the book that actually had our culture right, without the imperialistic or condescending view that accompanied most. I found few. This made me realise that Aboriginal culture and society in this country had been written by many experienced historians, anthropologists, authors and critics who were nearly always non-Indigenous, and this concerned me. Now, for me, it's like, when you read this, it's like, you want to talk about me? Well, I'm going to talk about you. She gives us, like, it's like a mirror on Australianness and Australian culture, and it's not a very pretty sight. And I think it's really, really valuable. I think that if you're, and I recommend it, even though it's like from 1996 and some of the stuff is, you know, a little bit dated, I actually think it's really good because it, if you're starting the journey, or if you're partway through the journey of really turning the gaze on your own self as a non-Indigenous Australian, I think this is a good book that will get you started. Because not so long ago we would say, well, we just need to learn about Aboriginal culture, you just need to learn about Aboriginal people and then they'll get it. Clearly that didn't work, or it's not happening, or whatever. But what we want, it's almost like what we want white fellas to do, or non-Indigenous people to do, is to look at themselves and their relationship to culture and unpack some of their own assumptions about who they are. And this is the book to do that, to help you get started on that journey. So Anita's book, Sacred Cows, Anita Heiss, Sacred Cows, and I'll put a link into it, and it doesn't take very long to read, and there's a few swear words in it, so it's probably, if you're going to use it with kids, senior school probably, there's a few swear words in there, but nothing that's not necessary. So yeah, it's funny, and she talks a lot about Australian sexism as well, the sort of hyper masculinity of some aspects of Australian culture. So that's that one. So that's my book. Okay.
Excellent.
Have you got something for next week?
We actually had the good fortune of having Dr. Anita Heiss work with some of our teachers here in Sydney over the last couple of weeks. Good value,
very good value as a speaker, as an educator.
I mean, you know, as you said, hilarious, entertaining, thought-provoking. But I remember one thing that she said that stuck with me is that Aborigines, living in Sydney, planes going over, Aborigines didn't exist until 1788. You know, the fact that, you know, that's someone else defining who we are as Indigenous people of this country. And I'd never really thought of it that way, so...
No, she was great. It was excellent being able to stop in and watch her in action in Sydney last month. She's very good value. So if you run a school or a school system and you need someone to come in and run an entire day with a group of teachers, you know, 30 or something teachers, an entire day, one person, she's your person. She's fantastic. Heaps of resources. Keeps the audience completely engaged. It's interactive. They do work. They don't just sit there and listen, like, you know, just kind of absorbing stuff. They're actually doing stuff and creating things as well. So highly recommend Anita as a guest speaker.
And I mean, you know, from out of a word of a participant, in our feedback and evaluation, one of our teachers said that it was the best in-service they'd ever attended in their life. So,
well done.
That's a huge call. So,
and I think maybe part of the thing about Anita's ability to kind of cut through as a professional development person is that she's not, like, she's passionate about education. She's absolutely crazy passionate about education, crazy passionate about Indigenous literacy. She's an Indigenous Literacy Foundation ambassador, but she actually isn't a teacher, so I don't know, she's not embedded in a system, so she's not kind of dragged down by those expectations. She just comes in with this amazing energy and can't see why things can't be done, you know, properly. You know, she doesn't have any of, you know, which actually makes her really effective, I think. It could make you really effective, but she's so good, it's good.
And open to share her experiences and stuff and show teachers how it can be done. You know, by, you know, giving them the resources and, you know, and especially around, you know, literature for young people, young adults in that, you know, and what's out there.
Yeah.
So
Excellent. Okay. We've nearly finished. We've got one more segment, hopefully, I think. If you've just joined us, this is the Critical Classroom after dinner session. After this dinner hangout. Sorry, I'll get it right eventually. And we've talked about WIPC, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. We've gone through suggested a few resources, and we'll put the links in the show notes. The last section I wanted to talk about, and we have this on our blog, is a section called What's Your Problem? And where we answer your questions. And we've answered a few questions from different teachers. You can submit a question anonymously. Some questions I don't answer because they're actually offensive, so I just think some you can't answer because they're just a bit ridiculous. But we've answered a few. We've answered a couple of questions, and we certainly attempt to answer anything that that is an appropriate question. I had one question this week, because we get questions all the time, and sometimes I think if we can just put them all on like a live FAQ, frequently asked questions, you know, I've answered that one, go there. Because sometimes there are the same questions over and over again. But I had a question this week from a teacher looking for resources for Year 9 history, and she's after resources that provide an Indigenous perspective of invasion. I think that the students were examining the experiences of Australian colonisation from different perspectives, and she was looking for an Aboriginal perspective of invasion. There's heaps out there, so I'm not sure. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, you can go from, and she was looking for different text types as well, different genres. And I was thinking of there's quite a few excellent T-shirts, like and protest T-shirts and poster designs, like the Always Was, Always Will Be T-shirts. I was thinking Women of the Sun, but episode 1, I'll Into the Flame, but Lise is thinking maybe Year 9 might be a bit young for that one. Lise? Yeah?
Yeah, I was just... Yeah, so, I mean, I've showed it before in the classroom, but generally not below, say... Yeah, I'd still say Year 11 and 12, maybe Year 10.
Yeah. You should have a look at it. If you haven't seen it,
you need to do more than it is, like, because, and I think it's great that the whole film is in language, but it means that there's subtitles and stuff, and some of the content in it, I'm not sure. Cool, even though it's not specific, there's still some of the content. I probably would still target that at your senior stage 6.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's not so much the nudity, but the violence of it. And yet a lot of 13 and 14-year-olds, there'd be more violence in a Avengers movie, but you know that violence is fake, whereas the stuff that happens in Women of the Sun is real, and it's it's different. So have a look at it, but that is certainly a good video. If you haven't seen the Women of the Sun series, they are essential. The other resource that I would suggest are the NAIDOC posters, and you can like from previous years, NAIDOC posters, some of the early years stuff, and you can get that. You can access the NAIDOC posters from the AIATSIS collection online. They have most of the videos, most of the posters online. There's a few years that are missing, but most of them are there, and I'll put that link in the show notes. And the other one is, and this is one that Anita reminded us of in her presentation, is the Last Kinnection song. Last Kinnection are a Australian hip-hop band, Indigenous hip-hop band, and their song called I Still Call Australia Home is a good one. And there's a couple of versions of that on YouTube that you can access. There's I've seen the concert one, but it's actually really hard to understand the words of the lyrics, but there's one there that's been created by somebody else, and it has images that really bring home and make it really clear what the song is about. So I would recommend that one as well. I'm sure there is a Kevin Gilbert or a Udjuru Knuckle poem that would also fit there. We can have a look around for that and see, and perhaps write a blog post on that one. So if you have any questions, please let us know what they are. You can either tweet them, Facebook them, Google Plus them, or fill in the form on the website. I think that's about it. We're nearly done.
Right. Cool. First one down.
First one down. It's a wrap. Nah, not a wrap just yet. I was just going to say thank you for joining us on our first Critical Classroom Google Hangout. Next week, we will be in Hawaii. So if we have an internet connection, we will. It would be great if we could hang out on air from Hawaii, but we may not be. We may not make it because of the. It's all about web connections. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and at our blog. We don't have a YouTube Critical Classroom YouTube account, but you can follow me, Lisa Watego, on YouTube for all of the Critical Classroom videos. And don't forget, I've created a few playlists there that might be of interest to you, teachers and others. Hopefully we'll bring you interviews and more resources. If you have resources that you want us to share, send us a copy and we should be able to, and we can review them and have a yarn about them. That's it. We've done. That's more than half an hour though, Lisa. You talk too much.
Oh.
You talk too much.
That wasn't as scary as I thought.
You did it. Thanks very much for listening. We had a few viewers. We're awesome. Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Bye.